Hello everyone, Mr. Lawback here. In this video, I want to go over the battles of Lexington and Concord, which were the first battles of the American Revolutionary War, and the Second Continental Congress. Let's begin by refreshing ourselves on the causes of the American Revolution. The American Revolution was principally caused by colonial opposition to British attempts to impose greater control over the colonies and to make them repay the Crown for its defense of them during the French and Indian War, also called the 7 Years' War. So there was not one specific cause, but a bunch of small causes that led up to one big cause. So you've got the French and Indian War, you've got a bunch of taxes, laws, and more taxes that are passed. You've got protests across the colony, which contribute to it. You have the Boston Tea Party, the Boston Massacre. You have the Stamp Act, the Townshend Acts, the Intolerable Acts, also known as the Coercive Acts. So again, it was a chain of events and a bunch of policies that collectively caused the American Revolutionary War. There was not just one cause. So you might remember that during the First Continental Congress, the delegates pleaded with the King and Parliament to repeal the Intolerable Acts. King George and the British government, led by Lord North, did not respond favorably to the petition of the First Continental Congress to repeal these acts. The British government saw no reason to compromise with the American colonists. They failed to comprehend that events were moving out of their control. The Americans were rapidly establishing a unified front against the Intolerable Acts and British attempts to weaken colonial self-government. In Massachusetts, the Assembly met in defiance of the orders of General Thomas Gage, the acting governor of Massachusetts, thanks to the Intolerable Acts. It became, in effect, a shadow government, exerting its influence over most of the colony outside of Boston, where Gage sat with his small army of redcoats. Pursuant to the Suffolk Resolves call for the colonies to upgrade their militias, the Massachusetts Assembly created a militia system independent of General Gage's control. Arms and munitions for these men were stored in the town of Concord, outside of Boston. In February of 1775, the British government declared Massachusetts to be in a state of rebellion. On the night of April 18th into April 19th, Gage sent a force of 700 men to destroy the militia arsenal in Concord. Word of this expedition soon leaked to the Americans, and Paul Revere and William Dawes rode out of Boston to spread the word that the redcoats were coming. As the sun rose on April 19th, the British vanguard encountered a force of about 80 militiamen gathered on the town common at Lexington. The British ordered the militia to disperse. The American militia commander ordered his men to fall back, but not everyone heard him. At this moment of uncertainty, someone fired a shot. More shots followed, and the British charged with bayonets. Within minutes, 8 colonists were dead and 10 wounded. This was the famous shot heard round the world, and the Revolutionary War had begun. The British continued to advance to Concord. The Americans were ready for them. More and more militiamen were gathering. The British found and destroyed some military supplies, but did little significant damage. The militias were able to hide a lot of the weaponry from the redcoats. A large group of militiamen advanced on the British troops guarding the North Bridge on the outskirts of town, and after an exchange of gunfire, drove them away. The British began to march back to Boston. Along the way, they were attacked by groups of angry militiamen using guerrilla warfare tactics. Only the timely arrival of reinforcements by Gage saved the column of troops. In this fighting, the British lost 275 men, and 93 American colonists were killed. Now, the Second Continental Congress. When the Second Continental Congress assembled in May of 1775, it faced unprecedented challenges. The colonies were in rebellion and engaging in a war with the greatest empire in the world. As word of Lexington and Concord spread, British authorities in the colonies rapidly collapsed. Colonial legislatures assumed local power, but the Second Continental Congress would have to guide the united destinies of the colonies in the coming conflict. The Continental Congress ended up being the de facto government of the colonists. Congress acted with decisiveness. It created the Continental Army and appointed the experienced soldier George Washington of Virginia to its command. Congress created a committee to formulate and conduct foreign policy. It also began issuing paper money to finance the war. Even as it prepared for military operations, Congress made a last effort at peace. Congress sent the Olive Branch petition to King George, asking the king to mediate a, quote, happy and permanent reconciliation to the conflict between the colonies and the British government. King George was in no mood to offer concessions to the Americans. He and his government were determined to quell the rebellion in the colonies by force. Because of this, even the political moderates in the colonists were forced to consider the possibility of independence. So a couple of key takeaways. The significance of the Lexington and Concord battles was that it was the beginning of the American Revolution, and there was no declaration of war. It kind of just happened. When word spread of these battles, it convinced many Americans to take up arms against the British. The significance of the Second Continental Congress was that it met in crisis and formed an army and began moving towards officially declaring independence, which of course would take place with the Declaration of Independence written primarily by Thomas Jefferson in July of 1776.